From the boundless realms of human experience where whispers of the past echo into the present, welcome to a new deep dive from the All Sorts podcast. Today, we're not just turning a page in history, we're stepping through, well, kind of a portal into the shadow-drenched landscape of 16th century Scotland. A time where the iron will of a young king clashed with the terrifying specter of witchcraft.
Welcome. Yeah, this deep dive, crafted with your curiosity in mind, takes us right to the heart of that tumultuous era. We'll be looking at the intense and often pretty brutal relationship between King James VI and the Scottish witchcraft trials.
And you've provided a really fascinating collection of source material for this journey. We've got accounts from BBC Bitesize, some detailed explorations of King James's consuming interest in witchcraft, and even a direct line to his own thoughts through his Daemonologie, which is held at the National Library of Scotland. Plus, there's the broader context from Wikipedia and a focused academic study on James's involvement.
Yeah, and our goal really is to synthesize these different perspectives, to move beyond just recounting events and, truly understand the underlying forces at play. We want to uncover not just what happened, but why it was so significant, and maybe reveal some of the more unexpected parts of King James VI's entanglement with Scottish witchcraft.
Okay, so let's get our bearings.
Yeah.
What was the landscape like in Scotland, late 16th century, particularly around the time these witch trials started to escalate?
Right. So the period between roughly 1590 and 1592 saw this real surge of witchcraft accusations. It was concentrated mainly in East Lothian, with North Berwick becoming a kind of focal point.
Okay.
Over 70 individuals faced accusations just in that short time. And what's really notable is the direct personal intervention of King James VI himself in these trials. That really brought them national attention.
And this wasn't happening in a vacuum, right? There was a broader European context, this fear about witchcraft.
Absolutely. The whole latter half of the 16th century, you see Europe kind of gripped by anxieties about witchcraft and, demonic influence. Scotland had already put these fears into law with the Witchcraft Act of 1563.
Right, that was under Mary, Queen of Scots, his mother.
Exactly. And that made witchcraft a capital crime. And then you had things happening elsewhere, like the really horrifying Trier witch trials over in Germany, which just amplified these fears across the continent.
So, James, inheriting the throne as a young man, he's ruling a kingdom already kind of steeped in this climate of suspicion and dread.
Precisely. And, maybe feeling the weight of the crown, navigating the complexities of his early reign, James seems to have been really significantly influenced by this pervasive paranoia around witchcraft. It likely made him more willing to believe in the threat.
Then we have the dramatic arrival of the storms. How did those weather events play into everything that was unfolding?
Well, and in 1589, James sailed over to Denmark to marry Anne. Their return journey in April 1590 was hit by these extraordinarily violent storms. One of their ships actually sank.
Wow. And in an era like that, so deeply imbued with superstition, these severe weather events, they weren't always seen as just random. They could easily be interpreted as, the result of malevolent forces at work.
So not just bad luck, but maybe deliberate acts. And is this where Galus Duncan, the maidservant, she enters the story?
Yes. Around the same time as these storms, Galus Duncan, who was a maidservant in Tranent near North Berwick, started attracting suspicion. Her habit of wandering at night made people wary, especially in a community already primed to look for signs of witchcraft. When she was questioned and then tortured using thumbscrews, well, she confessed to practicing witchcraft and, importantly, implicated others in what she claimed they were doing.
And it wasn't just events in Scotland fueling this. Things were happening across the sea, too, weren't they?
Yeah, what's fascinating is the timing, the synchronicity with the Copenhagen witch trials in May 1590. Over there, a woman named Anne Colding confessed under torture
to conjuring demons specifically to stop Princess Anne's voyage to Scotland. When news of that confession reached James back in Scotland, it must have just reinforced his suspicions that supernatural forces were actively working against him and his new queen.
It's like this feedback loop of fear, isn't it? Events in both countries seemingly confirming the worst anxieties.
Yeah.
So how did the North Berwick witch hunt, beyond just Galus Duncan, really pick up steam?
Well, a local landowner in Tranent, David Seaton, he became increasingly suspicious of his servant, Galus Duncan. It wasn't just the night wanderings. She was also known locally as a healer, which back then could itself be viewed with suspicion.
Ah, right. Risky profession.
Definitely. So Seton, fearing witchcraft, had her arrested and subjected to torture, including the pillywinks, that's a device designed to crush the fingers. Excruciating pain. And it's also alleged they found the devil's mark on her throat, the supposed physical sign of a pact with the devil.
The devil's mark. Yeah. That physical sign believed to seal the deal with evil. Such a potent symbol of the era's beliefs.
And under that intense pressure, physical and psychological, Geillis confessed, like we said. And she named others, from Edinburgh and East Lothian, claiming they were all part of this conspiracy to sink the king's ships.
And who else did she name?
Among others, she named John Fian, who was a schoolmaster. He, along with others she implicated, was also arrested and subjected to brutal torture, often using something called the boot.
The boot. That sounds grim.
It was a particularly gruesome method, basically an iron casing fitted around the leg, and they hammered wedges into it, often crushing the bones.
The sheer brutality used to get these confessions. It's almost unbelievable today.
It really is. And these confessions, pulled out under such extreme duress, they just fueled this rapidly expanding wave of accusations. People, desperate to stop the torture, would name more and more alleged accomplices.
The sort of horrible domino effect.
Exactly. And a narrative started to form, describing these secret gatherings of witches, the devil appearing to them physically, giving instructions, and specific plots to assassinate King James.
And we also had the account of Agnes Sampson, right? With the unusual method involving a cat.
Yes, Agnes Sampson's confession is quite memorable. She claimed she drowned a cat in the River Forth, specifically to conjure those storms that hit the king's return voyage.
Drowned a cat?
Yeah, and even more remarkably, she confessed to sailing across the sea in a sieve, which is a detail that later, famously, found its way into Shakespeare's Macbeth.
Sailing in a sieve, it's so specific and strange.
It is, and in just that small area of North Berwick, over 100 people were eventually implicated, and tragically, a significant number of them were executed, usually strangled first, then burned at the stake.
It paints such a harrowing picture, a community just gripped by fear, where an accusation could mean a horrific death. And King James wasn't just watching this happen, was he?
No, far from it. James took a very direct, very active role. He ordered the main suspects brought to Edinburgh. He personally authorized the continued use of torture.
He authorized it himself.
Yes, and he even conducted interrogations himself, most notably with Agnes Sampson. Apparently, he was deeply shaken when she was able, supposedly, to recount private conversations he'd had with his wife, Anne.
Wow. That would be unsettling, to have someone reveal private details like that.
Absolutely. That seemingly impossible knowledge appeared to James to validate his belief in their powers, their real malevolent intent. Ultimately, around 70 people were tried in connection with this initial surge.
70.
And James's personal involvement is really hammered home by the case of Barbara Napier. When a jury initially acquitted her, James actually intervened, demanded a retrial, and insisted she be executed.
You overruled a jury.
He did. And then there's Geillis Duncan. Just before her execution, she dramatically recanted her entire confession, stating it was only made under the unbearable pain of torture. But she was executed anyway. Strangled and then burned.
It really shows the extent of the king's conviction and, well, the total lack of recourse for the accused. So what was driving James? This profound belief, this active participation? What made him so certain?
Well, several things likely fed into it. James's early life was marked by a lot of instability and violence. You know, his father was assassinated, his mother was forced to abdicate.
Right, a very turbulent childhood.
Exactly. That kind of political turmoil could easily have instilled in him a deep-seated anxiety about conspiracies and threats to his authority. So these vivid accounts of plots against him and his wife, they would resonate powerfully with someone who'd already experienced that kind of danger.
That makes sense. A childhood like that could definitely make him more susceptible to believing in hidden enemies.
Mm-hmm.
The dramatic events of the North Berwick trials, especially the storms threatening his own life, and these confessions detailing plots, they seem to have genuinely convinced James of the very real, present danger posed by witches, their potential for treason. That personal experience was a powerful catalyst.
And then, of course, there's his book, Daemonologie. What does that tell us about his thinking? Right, published in 1597, Daemonologie is basically James laying out his whole view on witchcraft. He argued passionately for severe punishment, viewing witchcraft as the ultimate betrayal. He called it high treason against God.
High treason against God. Strong words.
Very. The book was his detailed attempt to persuade any doubters left out there about the genuine existence and the inherent danger of witchcraft. It wasn't just a personal thing, it was a public declaration meant to influence others.
And it was influential, wasn't it? You mentioned Shakespeare earlier.
Hugely influential. Yeah, its impact on Macbeth is clear, even down to that detail of the witches sailing in a sieve, echoing the North Berwick confessions directly. And for James, remember, the alleged plot against his wife wasn't just personal. It was a direct assault on the Stuart dynasty, on the whole issue of royal succession.
So beyond these personal fears and dynastic worries, were there also political calculations involved in his intense focus on witchcraft?
Oh, undoubtedly. James was quite shrewd politically. He definitely used the witchcraft trials to further his own agenda. Accusations against the Earl of Bothwell, who was a persistent rival.
Bothwell.
Exactly. Accusing him served to weaken a major political adversary, all under the guise of rooting out witchcraft. Plus, the trials gave James a chance to assert more royal authority over the Scottish Kirk, the church. He saw parts of the Kirk as potentially challenging his power.
So he used the fear to consolidate his own position.
Pretty much. It was a way to demonstrate his control. You see a shrewd, maybe even Machiavellian understanding of how to leverage widespread fear. Establishing those standing commissions in 1592 to specifically try suspected witches, that was a key move.
How so?
It centralized his control over the whole judicial process. These commissions basically bypassed local authorities and the Kirk, putting witchcraft prosecution directly under royal command.
Right, taking power away from others.
And then the publication of that pamphlet, News from Scotland, which sensationalized the North Berwick events, that was pure propaganda. It amplified public fear and painted the king as the divinely appointed protector against witches. Very deliberate shaping of public perception.
A clever, if cynical, move.
Indeed. But then, interestingly, by 1597, perhaps feeling more secure politically, maybe recognizing the potential for injustice, James did something significant. He revoked the standing commissions.
He shut them down.
He did, which served a couple of purposes. It showed his ultimate authority. He could grant this power and he could take it away. And it also allowed him to present himself as a just ruler, someone concerned about potential abuses in the system. Daemonologie, in this context, also works as a kind of scholarly justification for his earlier actions, framing his deep involvement as this righteous battle against God's enemies.
It's a really complex picture, isn't it? A king navigating this dangerous world, using every tool he had, spiritual and political. Now, what happened when he went south, when James became King of England? Did his views on witchcraft stay the same?
It's interesting. When he became King of England in 1603, James found a country where the fervor around witchcraft was generally less intense than in Scotland.
Really? Less intense?
Yeah, generally. Now, the English Parliament did pass an act against witchcraft in 1604, making it a capital offense, and that was undoubtedly influenced by James's strong beliefs. But his personal involvement in actively hunting down and prosecuting witches in England, it was noticeably less pronounced.
So he kind of backed off a bit in England.
It seems so in terms of direct engagement. He even showed skepticism in some high-profile cases, like the Anne Gunter case around 1604-1605. He personally investigated and concluded she was faking the bewitchment.
Huh. So he could be skeptical sometimes.
Apparently so, especially later on. And in the Leicester case of 1616, he again intervened to expose what he saw as a fraudulent accusation. It suggests maybe a growing discernment, perhaps helped by being more secure politically and just being in a different cultural context in England.
So his interventions in England were maybe more about showing his wisdom.
Possibly. They often serve to showcase his self-proclaimed expertise on witchcraft, projecting this image of a wise, just king who could see through deception, a way to reinforce his authority in his new kingdom.
It's fascinating to see that evolution. So what was the lasting impact, the legacy of James's involvement, especially back in Scotland?
Well, the North Berwick trials in Daemonologie, they had a profound and really devastating impact on Scotland. They significantly fueled about 6 years of intense witch hunting across the country.
Just 6 years.
Yeah. Estimates suggest that during that era, over 3,500 people were accused of witchcraft in Scotland, and maybe 2/3 of them were executed.
3,500 accused. That's staggering.
It is. This widespread persecution left a deep trauma on Scottish communities, fostering this atmosphere of fear and suspicion for a long time. James's direct impact on English witch trials, as we said, was comparatively minimal, but it's really important to note that, much later in the 21st century, both the Scottish government and the Church of Scotland have formally apologized for the grave injustices and persecution of those accused during that dark period.
A necessary acknowledgement, even centuries later. It's a stark reminder, isn't it, of the terrible consequences when fear runs rampant and power is misused.
Absolutely. As we bring this deep dive to a close, you can really see how the convergence of King James VI, deeply personal experiences, the prevailing superstitions of his time, and his own astute, sometimes ruthless political maneuvering. It all created this pivotal and ultimately tragic chapter. His entanglement with Scottish witchcraft gives us this powerful and frankly unsettling lens to examine the anxieties and the exercise of power back in the early modern world.
We really hope this exploration has illuminated some, maybe unexpected corners of the past for you, offering a richer, more nuanced understanding of this really complex time. If you found this journey through the shadowed annals of 16th century Scotland as gripping and insightful as we did, well, then imagine the myriad other fascinating explorations awaiting you within the boundless library of the All Sorts podcast. We wholeheartedly invite you to become a vital part of our quest for knowledge. Like this deep dive, please share it with fellow seekers of truth and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Your support truly fuels our journey, helping us bring more hidden gems of history and insight to light.
And don't forget to delve into our extensive collection of past deep dives on the All Sorts podcast. There's a whole universe of captivating topics waiting for you. You can also connect with the vibrant All Sorts podcast community on X, Instagram, and Threads for even more engaging content and discussions. It's where ideas spark and perspectives intertwine.
Remember, there's always another layer to uncover, another perspective to consider, and another story waiting to be told right here on the All Sorts podcast.